seconds. Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of RedShark Live. I think this is the 8th one we've done, gone by in a flash. Anyway, you are witnessing a world first, I think, possibly today, because you are looking at me through the incredibly anticipated Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. A bit of a mouthful of a name for such a small camera, but we now have one of these, and we've been testing it, and the first half of our review is coming out in RedShark on Friday. But first of all, we thought we'd give you an opportunity to see us, that's me and Simon, RedShark's deputy editor, talking about the camera. So first of all, as ever, I just want to say thank you very much to our sponsors, Matrox, who are a brilliant company, and they make brilliant products, one of which we're using to encode and stream this broadcast. It's the Matrox Monarch HDX, Matrix Monarch HDX. It's a kind of streaming appliance, which means you just turn it on and it just works without any further ado, which is exactly what you want if you're doing a live show. Anyway, so let me just tell you a little bit about what you're seeing. First thing I want to say is that this is not a scientific test. This is not a laboratory. It's not ideal in any sense at all, because as you see, we have got natural light behind us. We've got artificial light in front of us of an unknown quality. We haven't tested or calibrated anything. So do not regard this as a scientific or even particularly fair test. We're doing it because we wanted to show the difference rather than the actual qualitative nature of this. We want to show you the difference between a few modes on this camera. So we're going to pretty much do that now, and then Simon's going to come over here, join me. I'm going to talk to him about his experiences with the camera so far. He's not finished with it yet, but you only have to spend a few minutes with this to realise it's quite a groundbreaking device, and there are reasons for that you might not actually have thought of. So first of all, just want to check with you, Simon, we are in enhanced video mode now. So let me just explain that. We're quite familiar now with cameras having different modes and looks, and broadly these are normal video, which we've been calling Rec 709 or just 709. 709 is it's an HD standard, but it was devised to give the best looking picture with video on a TV, given the limited dynamic range of displays and given the relatively small color gamut. And you'll see this in a minute when we compare this shot with a conventional 709 type shot. You'll see that there's almost a jarring difference between the two, and we wouldn't ever suggest intercutting between the two, because of course this is a cinema camera. It's not designed for live broadcast, but this is live, so if we're going to show it working, we have to do it live. So what you'll notice is that perhaps the picture you're looking at now looks a tiny bit desaturated, maybe. The colours don't fly out at you. You can see the trees in the background are kind of grey-green. It's a very important thing to realise here, though, that is the actual way they look in real life. Yeah. When you look at those trees behind me, that is the colour they look. When you look at my blotchy face, that is how it looks. If you're sat here in the room, what you're seeing is what you're seeing on the monitor. So I just wanted to illustrate this because here's a cup, okay? You can see there's plenty of colour in that cup. If I hold that next to my face, I'm doing this for a reason because I want to show you something in a second. Hold that next to my face, you can see there's a clear difference. Look, my face is kind of face coloured, and the, sorry, I'm just looking around at my monitor, and the cup is red and white stripy cup coloured. And please note that they may not look particularly bright and saturated, but again, they're not in real life. Those are not sort of screamingly saturated colours. These are, it's a kind of fairly muted orangey red, and I think that's actually what you're seeing if your monitor is anything like our monitor here. So can we switch to one of the other cameras? That's great. Maybe even the close-up. Well, that's it. Now, you may think your gut reaction might be that's a better picture, but the reason you're saying that is because there's more colour in it, it's more contrasty. But actually, I'm relieved to say that my face doesn't look anything like that. That is nothing like the colour of my face. Now, if I bring the cup back, well, you know, the cup is more saturated, my face is more saturated. I'll talk to Simon about this in a minute, but my instinct is, and I'm not an expert, is telling me that what's happening is in 709 you have a smaller colour gamut. You know, the triangle of colours is smaller, it includes a smaller range of colours, and the dynamic range is less on the display, so it has to make the whole thing appear more contrasty. What it's doing is it's kind of boosting or enhancing somehow the colours that are present, because it can't rely on the colours that are outside of that colour triangle. It can't show you something that isn't there. So when you switch back to this, which is the Blackmagic camera in enhanced video mode, which I should explain, my understanding of this is to give you a more kind of, hesitate to say this, but cinematic look straight out of the camera. In other words, a look that you can use without going through a process of grading. And when you think about this, this could be incredibly useful because the graded look is very, very fashionable these days. And, you know, understandably, I think the 709 look is looking a bit out of fashion. So if you can get a well graded looking video clip without actually having to grade it, that's a huge bonus for productivity. I mean, I love that. You know, much as I like the idea of grading and spending, you know, staying up for 24 hours trying to, you know, get a corporate video or something like that to look right, how much better would it be if you didn't have to do that and you can get a basically good looking, and if you look at my shirt, it's grey, but that is I think a pretty accurate grey, don't you, Simon?
Yeah. I mean, we were seeing bigger differences in the harsh sunlight.
Yeah. So I don't think Simon's got his mic on yet, but you were saying you can see bigger differences when we had the harsh sunlight. Can you go back to this is a Sony A7S? I mean, again, perfectly acceptable picture, but you can see the difference. It's just a different philosophy. Neither picture is wrong or particularly at fault. It's just a different approach to how you capture video. So let's just go back to the Blackmagic again. And, you know, as I said, you would never actually switch between them. There's actually a wasp on my desk. So you'd never actually switch between them in a multi-camera shoot. Maybe you have. Oh. Okay, all right, got it. Okay, so bear in mind, please remember, we're only doing this to illustrate some points. You know, I can't repeat this often enough. This is not a quality test. Do not go away thinking you have seen anything which will give you anything quantitative about this camera. We're just pointing out some differences. So, okay, I think that's probably a good time for you to come in, Simon.
Keeps
All right. So sorry about the microphone noises, everyone. How's that?
That's better.
Okay. So Simon's going to come over, noisily put his microphone on.
Yeah, it'd be less noisy than the last time, I think.
Yeah.
I came in. Actually, I'll get the camera as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Our massive crew are in the other room watching
Actually, no, I won't because it's all hooked up, isn't it?
watching the telly. So we're having to do this ourselves. So
okay.
Simon, we've had some fun with this, haven't we? Actually,
Yes.
getting our heads round it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, as you said earlier, there's a lot of things about it which aren't immediately apparent in terms of how it can be used and how it looks. The common comment that you see is that it looks like a DSLR. Why don't I just get a DSLR? What's the advantage here?
Yeah.
And actually, when you use it, you realise that
Yeah. Sorry. Apparently, your mic needs to be closer to your mouth. I can't hear you very well.
professional video people. Is that better?
Okay. All right. Well, I tell you what we'll do, because obviously something's happened to your microphone. I'll actually hold the microphone close to you.
We're doing
this is live, folks.
we're doing really well here.
Yeah. Here we are. So,
Yeah. So when you use it, you realise that the controls are incredibly intuitive. Are we still having audio issues? Okay, I think we're okay.
I tell you, can you just nip over there, stick the cans on?
I will double check.
Sorry, guys, there's just two of us here, so we're just going to double check the audio. Make sure you can hear me. I'm just going to do a quick sound check.
That's coming through.
1 2 1 2.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I think we'll just stick with this microphone.
It was all going so well.
Well, still is if you've only got one ear.
Okay, so although it looks like a DSLR, when you start using it, you realise that because it is video focused, the controls are to hand.
Yeah.
There's no clutter. There's nothing there that's designed to be mixed with stills operation. Everything is video focused. So your fingertips are there by it. You've got the ISO button. You've got the high frame rate button. You've got the iris dial. There's no fiddliness to it. Everything is right there where you need it.
So the looks are misleading in a sense, aren't they? Because it does look like a DSLR, but that is a superficial similarity.
Exactly.
Can you hold that for a second?
Exactly. It's precisely that, and it's very. What I found in using it so far is that it's very, very quick to use, and just intuitive. It's literally fingertip control.
All right. I just wanted to say I forgot to add this, that if you want to leave a question, go through to YouTube, click through until you're on the actual YouTube page, and you can leave messages there. If you don't want to do that, just put it on Twitter and use the hashtag RedShark Live. Very important. Use the hashtag RedShark Live, and then we will pick it up. And we've got quite a few questions coming in already. So just remember to do that hashtag RedShark Live, or use the client on YouTube. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a very, very quick to use camera, very intuitive, and you can see the whole design philosophy behind it is very straightforward. I think you could be somebody who is perhaps creative but not very technically minded, and you could find your way through the menus and set them up. They're the best designed camera menus I've seen in any camera. Everything is there. It's very clearly labelled and very easy to set up. And once you've done your initial setup for your project, you don't have to enter them again, really. You can access everything you need by either the physical controls or by the touchscreen on the back.
So, I mean, this is something I've talked about actually recently when I wrote a piece about how I think NLEs should have an easier mode, and I mentioned Blackmagic menus because they are a delight, aren't they, compared to the usual convoluted labyrinthine menus that have evolved. I think, to be fair to, let's say, the Japanese manufacturers, if they suddenly change their menus, there'd be complaints.
Yeah, I mean, the thing to understand about other professional cameras, if you think in terms of traditional video cameras, they've come from almost an engineering background. I mean, before the late 2000s, we had ENG cameras, and the camera guy, the guy operating the camera, rarely ever went into those engineering menus. You had to use a special combination of buttons and switches to get into them, so that you could access stuff like the gamma controls and the black levels and the color matrix and everything else. And it was, well, no, we don't want to go anywhere near that. That'll completely will mess up the camera. And then people gradually started to learn about them. And I did a lot of sort of my own research, discovering how to get best use out of them. And there were a number of BBC white papers. So because people demanded that they could have better camera setup, the manufacturers started making these menus easy to access, but they still had that kind of engineering background to them, and they were still thought of in that way, the way you navigated them. And I think that's still the case now, even though they're a lot better. Yeah. Whereas Blackmagic have come from a completely clean slate.
They've been making cameras for 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and their whole ethos is, well, we're going to design this from scratch. We're going to make it as easy as possible to use. They want to make this camera so easy that a chimpanzee could pick it up and be able to set it up correctly and get it to work correctly.
And why wouldn't you if you were starting from scratch?
Exactly. And if you're in the field and you do need to make a change, you don't want to be going through loads of submenus and thinking, well, where was that bit? I mean, even on cameras that I've been familiar with in the past, I've sometimes needed to get to something very quickly, and because it's buried somewhere, I haven't been able to find it. I'm still trying to dig through it. I'm sure it was here somewhere, but I don't know where.
Because you go down one of those long tendrillous branches, and you may never realise that it's actually physically very close, but down another branch. So, well, let's wrap up this part of the conversation by saying, well, it does kind of have the form factor of a DSLR, but that is a kind of false friend, because it is completely different in nature. It's fully optimized for movie use, and once you get the hang of that, then you realise everything about it is far more logical. Is that right?
That's correct, because they've been able to they've come at it from the point of view, this is a camera that is designed for video. It's designed to do specifically one thing, and the controls are designed around that. Yeah. Nothing else.
Yeah. Okay, so just moving on to your experience with it, you're still working on your 2-part review. But what's your impression of using this in the real world?
Yeah, I mean, it's, as I said, it's very, very fast to use, but something to understand about it is how the dual ISO abilities of it actually apply to you in the real world. But this is a very quiet camera. I showed you earlier the
quiet in the sense of video, absence of video noise.
And I showed you earlier in the maximum ISO setting, and the noise, although it was there, was still perfectly acceptable. Yeah. So the ISO can be adjusted in quarter stop increments, which means that you can use it as an actual exposure tool without having to worry too much about introducing excess noise. There are differences in the dynamic range as you go through the ISO ranges.
Yeah. Just thinking, why not take the camera off its tripod? We'll just have a look at it. I mean, I remember when I saw this for the first time in Las Vegas in April in a little back room, and I mean the design's been a bit controversial, and I'm not sure why, because it seems to me it's a really well thought out design that is actually quite stylish. Everything about it is designed to lead towards the large screen on the back. It's actually a very bright screen, and it does have some dedicated controls. So not everything, you can do everything through the touch screen, but it has some dedicated. Can you give us an example of that? It's like, is it the iris you were showing me adjustment? It's got some dedicated hardware controls, but
I mean you can adjust it. You can just adjust the iris here with the dial on the front. I get that right. You've got the dial here, so your iris can be adjusted here, or you can adjust it here on the back screen. Just use this slider, which is really quite intuitive. We have a dedicated ISO button as well, and what I found was that because I wasn't having to worry too much about introducing noise at the different ISO ratings, when I was shooting quickly outside, a criticism of this type of camera is that it doesn't have an ND filter wheel built in.
Yeah.
And so what I was doing was I had an ND on the front, which I knew would allow me a flexibility of exposure settings. I was in an environment where it was very contrasty, it was bright sunshine, and there were also dark sort of shaded areas as well, which I needed to quickly be able to go between. So how can I do that? Well, I need the ND filter for sunshine, but what do I do if I look into the shadows and I've got an ND filter on? Well, this is great because I don't have to worry about that. I can ramp the ISO up using the dual ISO circuit, and hey presto, I've got my exposure in the shadows, which I wouldn't ordinarily be able to have. So it kind of negates, in a way, the fact that you haven't got an ND filter wheel on it.
Yeah, it's almost like a kind of software ability to compensate not having an NDA facility. And just to emphasise that when you get dual ISO cameras like this, dual native ISO, this is not achieved through, the higher ISO isn't achieved through adding gain and hence noise. It is genuinely has the same characteristics at the two ISO levels.
Yeah, I mean Blackmagic call it they call it a dual gain circuit. So they say when you're switching gain circuits when you go to the different native ISO. So the base native ISO of this camera is 400.
Yes.
And then the circuit switches over at 1250. And then when you get to ISO 3200, that's your best balance between signal to noise and your dynamic range. As far as I'm aware, it's 3200 on the upper gain circuit, and 400 on the lower.
It will go down to 100 though,
it'll go down to 100, which again can be really useful to be able to actually dial it down. And as I say, there are small trade-offs in dynamic range depending on these settings, but the way they've designed it isn't a huge trade-off. You're not really going to have to worry too much about what you're doing. But it means that you can set your aperture and then you can tune it with the ISO.
Okay, well look, we've got quite a few questions here. I'll just take a run at them. What's the recording time limit? Does it break the 29.59 barrier?
This is a video camera.
Yeah.
It's not a stills camera that does video, so those limits don't apply. Your limit is what your recording media can record.
Yeah, this is another This is another example of people being lulled into thinking this is going to behave like a DSLR or mirrorless when it's actually not.
Yeah, exactly. This is a video camera, not a stills camera that has to get around various tax laws or whatever.
Yeah. And related to that, it has a cooling fan.
Yes.
And somebody's just asked, is the cooling fan audible on the internal mics? I don't know if you've tested that.
I haven't got around to testing that yet. I would imagine there might be some, you might be able to hear it subtly if you had a very quiet room, but it is a very quiet fan.
Do you know if you can adjust the speed of the fans?
No, you can't. I have never had it where I can really audibly hear it. Obviously, I'm not the microphone, but your exhaust is on the underneath of the camera, so you have your intakes on the top, and your exhausts are on the bottom, so you can actually feel the airflow coming through on your.
Well, our friend who just asked the question about the recording time limit or the absence of it has just responded with a resounding yes, triumphant yes. I think he's pleased about, he or her pleased about that.
Yeah.
What storage media do you need to record raw video to?
Right, you need either a CFast 2 card. We're talking, especially if you're talking raw 60 frames a second, you will need a CFast raw card, or you will need an external SSD which plugs into the USB-C port on the side. So you won't be able to record raw at 60 frames per second on an SD card, for example. But who knows what will come if they put the new Blackmagic RAW system onto it? I don't know.
Well, and my next question is, how good will Blackmagic's RAW codec be with this camera, which kind of presumes that it's going to arrive on the camera, but I'd be very surprised if it didn't.
It would be extremely surprising if it didn't arrive on this camera. I mean, I can't make any comments on its quality because nobody has. I haven't, been able to try it. The only camera that it's on at the moment is the Ursa, so we haven't been able to look at that yet. But there's no reason to think that it would be, any worse than than anything else out there. So.
Okay, so here's another response from YouTube. So it's half the price, has different codecs and doesn't do stills, but otherwise it's kind of like the GH5. Is there anything you've noticed that has made it really special or different?
Right. Okay. The sensor, as far as I'm aware, is not the exact same sensor as the GH5S. I think it's based on the same thing. But you've got to understand that what the camera does with the information coming off the sensor is different. Blackmagic has spent a lot of time developing the color science of it, and for this extended video mode that it has on. So you're going to get a completely different look with this than you are with a GH5S. Panasonic have their own color science and their own way of doing things.
It's worth saying this again and again, that just because two cameras have the same sensor doesn't mean they're going to look even remotely similar. And this does happen a lot. There are only so many sensor manufacturers.
Yeah.
And many camera manufacturers. So you see this all over the place, and yet you don't get people saying, "Oh, this camera used the same sensor and it's absolutely identical." A sensor is a very raw component, and as you were saying, how you deal with that is really what gives it its character.
Yeah. But what's really good, what I really love about it is that flexibility you have, because you have the extended video mode in the camera, but you can upload any LUT that you want into the camera, but it comes with the extended video LUT as well. So if you put the camera into the film log mode, you press a button, and the LUT will be your monitoring LUT. So you can film in log, record log, but monitor in the extended video thing. So you have a better idea of exposure. But the new version of Resolve, the latest version of Resolve, has that extended video LUT built into it. So you can happily video in log, and then you can still apply the extended video LUT in Resolve, and you've still got that flexibility if you want. It hasn't hard baked it, but by the same token, you can upload any LUT into the camera, and you can use that as your monitoring LUT, or you can elect to have that as a baked-in look as well.
Okay, so the questions are flooding in, and we're past our normal time, but we'll stay streaming because it's worth getting through these. So here's a good question: can the camera power the external SSD?
Yes. The SSD, well, it depends on your SSD. I mean, there are some larger SSDs out there that require their own power supply, but if you're talking about something like a Samsung T5 or that kind of thing, the camera powers that. It's worth bearing in mind as well that the camera has a DC in socket for powering off the mains. But you can also charge your battery with a mobile phone charger, for example, and plug that in. It won't power the camera. You can't turn the camera on and use it with that because those don't have enough power. Yeah. But in the downtime, you can actually hook one of those up and charge the camera up while it's turned off, and you need to get a bit more juice in it because that's the one thing. The batteries, it does use a lot of power, so you will get through batteries through the day.
So does it have a stills feature?
Yes, it does. It records stills in 4K resolution. I think it's a DCI 4K resolution. So it's not a stills camera though. The stills functionality of this has been designed. You could take a still of your set or your location and get an idea of what it's like in the camera. You can use it for reference. It's not designed as a stills camera that you take on your holiday with you. There's nothing to stop you from doing that at all. If you want to do that, that's absolutely fine. But it's not what it's really primarily designed for. So don't mistake it as a similar thing to a DSLR or mirrorless where it does stills and video. It's not that at all.
It's not a hybrid camera in any sense, is it?
No, not at all.
Dedicated video camera. This is, for now, it's the last question unless we get any more popping up while we're talking. What's the battery life like on one LP6?
Okay, it varies. It depends on what you're doing. If you put it into the higher frame rate modes, for example, it's going to use more power. It's going to use more power if you've plugged in an SSD because obviously that needs power going to it. So Blackmagic claim between 50 minutes and an hour, and from my use of it, I would say that's about right. But what I found is that you need to have a new battery. I Blackmagic supplied a couple of E6 batteries with it, and they work great. But the batteries, I had a whole collection of them from using my Canon DSLRs, and it really does tell you if your battery needs replacing. They use up in no time. So I'm going to have to get myself some more if I decided to buy one of these cameras. You will get through batteries, but luckily the E6 batteries are inexpensive. They're small and light to carry around, and despite the fact it's roughly an hour runtime, that's still a lot better than the original Pocket Cinema camera, which could run out in about 20 minutes or so if you were lucky.
Okay, look, this is really useful stuff. We've actually closed the Q&A now. I'm going to let Simon scurry back to the controls so we can have a nice civilized fade to black at the end. And check out RedShark on Friday. We're going to have the first half of Simon's two-part review. and it's well worth checking that out. I think that's going to be really, really good. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much indeed for watching. You know, we're really happy that we could get one of the very first of these cameras to actually show live. Thanks for asking all the questions. If you have any more, just send them to Twitter, hashtag RedShark Live, or send them to me, editor@redsharknews.com. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.